I think it was Mark Twain who once said, the two most important days in your life, what are they? A lot of people often ask that question, or they ponder that question, and the answer that you probably get most of the time is that the two most important days in our life is the day we were born and the day we die. But Mark Twain didn't say that. He said the two most important days in our life is the day we were born and the day we find out why we were born. And I'm very, very clear on that sense of why. And that sense of why is to try and create workplaces, family groups, friendship groups all over the world, where people in those workplaces, in those families, amongst those friendship groups, feel that they genuinely have the choice to put their hand up, turn to a friend, turn to a colleague, and ask them for some help if they are struggling with a common form of mental ill health. Now, you might say to me, Geoff, why are you so passionate about trying to create that kind of world? And the reason I'm so passionate about it is I've got a bit of a story, and I'm going to share some of that story with you today. I want you to think back to 2008. I'll never, ever forget the date. It was the 25th of January, 2008. And the reason I don't forget that date is because on the 26th of January, 2008, my eldest daughter was going to turn 13. So you can imagine how much excitement there was in our household on the evening of the 25th of January. This young girl was going to go through a rite of passage, and she was going to become a teenager at midnight. And at midnight, I got woken up with the most massive panic attack. Now, I had never experienced a panic attack in all my life. I don't think I'd ever had a conversation with anybody about a panic attack. I don't think panic attack was part of my vocabulary. My fingers are tingling. The ends of my toes are tingling. My breathing is irregular. My heart is beating profusely. The bed sheets are wet with sweat. And because I've never experienced this, I think I'm about to have a heart attack. And I remember turning to my wife, Debbie, bumping her, waking her up, and saying, Deb, I think I'm about to have a heart attack. And I remember she said to me, why? And I explained what was going on, and she said, well, why don't you get up, walk around the room, take some deep breaths. And so I got up, I walked around the room, and I took some deep breaths. And slowly, those levels of anxiety began to subside. 7 o'clock the next morning, who comes running into our bedroom? Jennifer. I mean, she's so excited. It's her 13th birthday. And you know, we have a tradition at home where we open presents together on birthdays at the end of the bed. Anna, her little sister, comes running in after her. She's also excited. And all I can say to Debbie and to Jen and to Anna is, please, just leave me alone. Please just leave me alone. There's no ways I can engage in anything that is enthusiastic, where there's laughter, where there's noise, where there's joy. And all I want to do is I just want to take that duvet, I just want to pull it over my head. And for the life of me, I can't get myself out of bed on my daughter's 13th birthday. The girls go downstairs with their mum, they open presents, they go off to school. Debbie gets back at about 10 o'clock. Where am I? Still in bed. Now, I'm not the sort of guy who's in bed at 10 o'clock most mornings. I'm a typical South African. I love the outdoors. And here am I on my daughter's 13th birthday, struggling to get myself out of bed. I'm usually up early of a morning. I'll go for a run. I'll go for a swim. I'll go for a mountain bike ride. And Debbie said to me, what's wrong, Geoff? I said, I don't know. I just feel paralyzed by the anxiety that I feel. I can't even swing my legs onto the side of the bed and get myself out of bed. And she said, Geoff, you need to talk to somebody about this. I said, who? She said, well, why don't you go and see a doctor? I said, what, a doctor? I've got no pains. I'm not feeling nauseous. I've got no temperature. I've got no physical symptoms of being ill. Well, to cut a long story short, at midday, I'm in the doctor's rooms. And the doctor begins to ask me a set of questions. He asks me about my sleep, which, by the way, over the last 3 or 4 weeks had become very, very interrupted. I'd wake up 2, 3 of a morning and just can't go back to sleep, worrying, lying there, anxious about stuff. He asked me about my diet. Can't eat breakfast, can't eat lunch. Why? Because I'd wake up feeling anxious and just not wanting to eat. And so I'd lost a lot of weight. He then asked me, what about the things that you enjoy doing? And I said, you know what, over the last couple of weeks, I haven't enjoyed going for a bike ride. I haven't wanted to do that. I haven't looked forward to going on a holiday. What about the things that you read and you've stopped reading? He asked me. And I said, you know, funny you asked me that, doctor. I've stopped reading a newspaper. He said, why? I said, because if there's anything negative in a newspaper, it just triggers me. The doctor then asked me a very difficult question. He said, Geoff, have you had any suicidal thoughts? And I kind of thought to myself, wow, that's a hard question. And you know, if we think the stigma around mental ill health is high, the stigma around suicide is even higher. And I thought, no, I'm going to be honest, because over the last 3 weeks, I had some of those thoughts. And so I said, yes. He said, have you planned it? I said, no, I haven't planned it, but I know the method. And he then turned to me and he said, Geoff, you're ill. I said, what do you mean I'm ill, doctor? What am I ill with? You haven't taken my temperature. You haven't listened to my chest with your stethoscope. You haven't looked down my throat. You haven't looked into my eyes. You haven't looked into my ears. What do you mean I'm ill? You've done no physical diagnosis of me whatsoever. He said, Geoff, you're suffering from anxiety-fueled depression. Danny, you know what my understanding of the word depression was up until that point? My understanding of the word depression? I remember when I first moved to the UK, I'd been here for about 2 years. People used to talk to me about a thing called SAD. And I used to say, what's that? And they'd say, no, it's seasonal affects disorder. And I used to say, well, what's that? And they'd say, no, it's the weather. It can influence your mood. And I remember I used to think to myself, what a load of hogwash. The weather influence your mood. Why don't you just man up, you snowflake? I mean, this was my understanding of the term depression. And here I am on my daughter's 13th birthday, diagnosed with anxiety-fueled depression. As I left the doctor's rooms that day, I made a decision that saved my life. And the decision I made was that I refused to be burdened by the stigma that is associated with depression and anxiety. Now, I was quite lucky in many ways to be able to make that decision. First of all, I'd had a diagnosis. And the doctor, in many ways, liberated me to be able to make that decision because I now had a diagnosis. I kind of knew what was wrong with me. Secondly, I've got the sort of personality where I just wear my heart on my sleeve. So what you see is what you get. I'm not very good at compartmentalizing my feelings. I'm not very good at putting a mask on. Look me in the eye and you'll see if there's something wrong. And thirdly, I had a line manager. I had a boss at the time who had a compassionate and an understanding relationship to mental ill health. I was so lucky. Now, the reason that decision to not be burdened by the stigma saved my life is because during my recovery, and I had to take 3 months off work. I had to take 3 months off work. I was so anxious. I was so down. There's no ways I could be at work. And during those 3 months, I had dark moments. I had moments when I didn't think life was worth living. I had moments where I thought I was a burden to everybody else. The world would be better off without me. And you know, in those darkest moments, the only thing that kept me alive, that kept me going, was the most powerful emotion in the world. And do you know what it is? It's called love. And you know, just knowing that I was loved by my daughters, by my wife, by my friends, by colleagues at work, by my boss. And the only reason I felt that sense of love is because I'd been open. I'd been able to talk about my illness. And what did I get in return from those people was the most wonderful outpouring of the most powerful emotion in the world. It's called love. And I used to meet with a colleague of mine who 2 years prior to my illness had been so sick that he'd been admitted to the Priory. I was never that ill. I'd never been admitted to hospital. And you know, I used to meet with this guy every 10 days. And I saw he was better. Do you know what he gave me? He gave me hope. He gave me hope. And so a combination of feeling loved and a sense of hope that I could get through this illness were critical ingredients to my recovery. Yes, I took medication. Yes, some cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, slowly getting back onto my bicycle. And you know, those things worked for me. They don't necessarily work for everybody else. But what I honestly believe is that a sense of love and a sense of hope can be a key ingredient to the recovery of millions and millions and millions of people out there who might be struggling in silence as we talk today.